Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host Popeye from FEDERALJACK.com. Tonight's episode is a special pre-recorded broadcast because it's a 2-day interview I did with Judyth Vary Baker. You've heard her interviewed by me before. She's the girlfriend of Lee Oswald and a cancer researcher in her own right who inadvertently ended up working for the CIA on a bioweapon to kill Castro. And tonight we get into the cancer end of things and her research and the things that she knows about cancer and what she knows about what causes cancer and stuff like that. So stay tuned. It's very in-depth. Judyth, as you've never heard her before, so you don't want to miss anything. Let's get right into it. Judyth, I have to say one thing. I am proud to say that I consider you a friend, and I am glad that I got to know you. You are a remarkable woman.
God bless you.
And you know what? I know that wherever Lee is, he is proud of you. And you did the right thing, and I got to tell you, you made a difference, and you corrected history. So you can rest and relax a little bit and know that you made a massive difference in history. You gave people like me the ammunition to fight back against these scumbags, and we're doing it, and they're afraid of us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm proud of you. You've got the Guy Fawkes mask, okay? But this is what some of the people who you'll see that are really against this, they won't put their real names out. I mean, I'm putting my face out there, my name out there, and, I'm putting it on the line.
I agree. You're putting, and when you say you're putting it on the line, you really are putting it on the line. And I think it's more than just the information about Lee. A lot of people would say, oh, well, come on, it's been 48 years. Well, it's more than that, because when they look into what you were involved with Dr. Mary Sherman and with David Ferry, and then with the massive rise in cancer today, it's incredible. And I urge the listeners to go buy Judyth's book, Me and Lee, and buy Ed Haslam's book, Dr. Mary's Monkey, because the two of them go hand in hand. And when you read both books, read Judyth's first, then go back and read Ed Haslam's book. It makes Ed's a much faster read, because then you don't have, when you read the section about Judyth.
It really is the right way to do it, because first of all, Lee is human then, and then you're not going to be distracted. You're going to understand what we were doing and why it was important, and you'll see how hard it was to get this information out into the open. It took Ed so much time, and some of the things he did to verify, who I was and everything is really neat, because, he rode the same he rode the same bus route. He asked me, how did you get to David Ferry's? And I told him the route, and I said, yes, but you're not going to believe it. I had to take a different bus back. You couldn't take the same bus back. And he had that same experience. So there's many things like that, because they're saying things like, how do we know the bus route and all that? Well, Ed Haslam was a native of New Orleans. It's wonderful. It's like the hand of God put him there. He was personally even on the same bus route. I took. He knew these places, and he's unbelievably, before he even understood who I was or anything like that, he ends up living in Bradenton, Florida, where I grew up, and so he's got his hands right on all the research I was doing there before I ever, reached New Orleans, and before I went to the college and university. He saw the ground breaking work I was doing when I shouldn't have been able to do any of that stuff. So it was wonderful that he was able to be in the right places at the right time.
Very, very synchronistic.
Yes, it is. Oh, I don't like that too much, this synchronicity. I'm not positive that we can put a label on the different things that happen. Some very bad things have also happened, which have made it difficult and obscured a lot of the information. So here we go.
Okay. The first thing, we didn't have a lot of time, the first interview, to touch on the cancer research and stuff, because I wanted to focus, along with you, we wanted to focus on humanizing Lee to everybody, which
Right.
we've done. That interview has gone viral on multiple YouTube channels and other
Yeah, it's
video
been
sharing
wonderful.
services. So Lee has now been humanized. He is not this massive monster that people used to maybe look at him as. Now I want to focus, and we'll get back into Lee because again he is a very pivotal figure and everything in the grand puzzle that was the assassination. But if you look into the work you were doing, that was like a side caveat that it brushed up with the JFK assassination because of David Ferry and then Lee, and then blaming Lee for the assassination and all these other players that were trying to kill him. But there was so like a lot of times your work gets looked over. So
Yeah, Lee got invited into that, of course, several different ways. I told you about how he had the Viva Castro sign around his neck, and he didn't want to be stay in Dallas anymore. He also was having problems with his wife, so he goes to New Orleans because he had an excuse. He would be able to actually spy on what we were doing. This is a CIA-sponsored project way behind the lines, but on the other hand, CIA wants to know what's really going on and if everybody's doing what they ought to and if they're going to be able to get their hands on this material. One of the things, Popeye, like I think you brought it up, I can't remember, I've had so many interviews, but when we were, when Lee took the material over to Houston and they replaced that material with another bag is supposed to be fresher, 2 more thermoses, and it's supposed to be a day fresher, and to take that on to Mexico City. Had we touched on that at all? Well,
we
what I
touched
wanted to
on
talk
it.
about.
We touched on it a little bit, but we didn't get a chance to get into detail. So go ahead and get into as
Right,
much
well,
detail as you want, Judyth. The floor is yours.
okay, well, Ed Haslam and others, it took years. I mean, I didn't think like this because I was a very trusting person. I trusted my government and everything. But now what we think happened is they never intended that material to get into the hands of the Cubans. See? If you think about it, what if it did land in somebody else's lap? And it seems to me that what their main purpose was is to get Lee Oswald into Mexico City. So then they could go and frame him, and you have people impersonating him there. You do have Lee making some efforts to get into Cuba to get this material. And people who say he wasn't there, then how come he has a transit visa from Cuba coming to his residence in when he is back in Dallas, Texas? So, of course, we know that he did make those efforts personally. And it wasn't somebody else completely. They're trying to say maybe he wasn't there at all. Yes, he was. But the material, they never picked it up. The drop never occurred. He tried to have the handoff, and it didn't occur. And what we now believe is that when M.D. Anderson gave him the extra, it was a doctor from M.D. Anderson who gave him the extra material, we think that he handed over the real thing and got fakes that he was took to Mexico City, you see? Therefore, this material, and why am I talking about M.D. Anderson? Later you find out that somebody is suing somebody because they said they got injected with cancer cells at MD Anderson. You can look that up on the internet unless it's been removed. The lawsuit came out. Interestingly enough, you see that a lot of doctors from MD Anderson come to help Jack Ruby through his trial when he's in the hospital. They're dying of cancer. Well, they helped him in the wrong direction. I can assure you of that. And you find out that some of these doctors were trained in the Turo Infirmary and also at Charity Hospital and so on, and connections with Dr. Ochsner in New Orleans. So that you have doctors who are watching over Jack Ruby. There's supposed to be a team of cancer specialists. We know that the cancer cells went to MD Anderson. We have Jack Ruby saying he was injected with cancer cells. And he dies of cancer, of course, while he's in the hospital at Parkland, same hospital where Kennedy died, same hospital where Lee Oswald, poor Lee, also died. To me, everything was orchestrated. They had a lot of control from top to bottom of all this, and they have the material, and that's what should concern us. They do have this material.
Now, this is something I wanted to get into. The material that they have that you guys worked on, that
Yeah.
cancer-causing agent. We had
Yeah.
slightly touched on that, but I did question you whether or not you thought that they used it today. Because if you notice, certain world leaders that don't play with the New World Order,
Yeah.
they end up getting
Yeah, they're
cancer.
not.
So
They're not. Yeah, they're not playing the game well, so they want to pick up their marbles and go home and go to a hospital and die. I First of all, when we were working with this, and you look at this, this is almost 50 years ago, and to think that they have made no advances in this area, and would they ever use this material? These are the same people. Remember, we have these wonderful leaders who are telling us that there were weapons of mass destruction, so we go and enter Iraq. We have lies about the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We have Watergate, and by the way, there's more to Watergate than people know that has to do with the Kennedy assassination. I'm sure you understand that and what that was about. But yeah, first of all, it'd be absurd to think that if they're working, have taken all Nixon bringing all these materials from everywhere, he had it all brought to Fort Detrick. And if he has it brought to Fort Detrick, and then we lose track of everything, and we know that they're working, the United States is working with anthrax, right, in labs. What business have we to do with making anthrax? If I can understand making a little anthrax so that you can go ahead and see if you can find a way to combat it, okay? But the massive amounts of anthrax, I mean, the number of labs that are making it, and to think that nobody thinks that they have made a cancer that could kill people, isn't this just pushing it a little bit when we know we can inject? We'd take a mouse. This is 48 years ago. Take a mouse, brand new, out of its mother's womb, and it has been, at that stage, there is no immune system. If you inject cancerous material into a baby mouse with no immune system set up, it develops cancer immediately. And that material from the SV40 monkey virus, we had it happen. Trouble is, how would you transfer that to a human being? And of course, that was what our project was about. Now, the SV40 monkey virus, of course, is the kind of cancers that were produced were basically related to what polioma, which means many different kinds of cancer. So it isn't one kind of cancer. Today we have like an epidemic in rare cancers. You never used to hear about bone cancer or brain cancer. These things people didn't get. Lung cancer, of course, Dr. Oxner is wakened in the middle of the night so they could show.
this was the first time the call got disconnected.
We've had problems over here with being cut off.
Yeah,
as
that's
I
what
told
happened.
you, it's been awful.
Yeah, they don't want you to get out your message, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to make sure it gets out.
Well, I mean, we spent 2 hours. I told you we've used 3 different cell phones to get through with this other interview. There's no reason why this should have cut off. We have plenty of minutes on the phone and everything. So I mean, this is not good. Okay. And also there was a message on my phone saying your call has been diverted.
Let's get back into it. When you were cut off, you were talking about how Dr. Oxner had been awoken in the middle of the night when he was in university.
He was a young man.
Lung cancer was, really rare, right?
That's right. It's so rare they woke him up in the middle of the night to look at a case of it. And then it became quite prominent, mainly because of smoking. But now, of course, we have so many carcinogens. We have lung cancer showing up with people, of course, who have never smoked in their lives, and they say, well, it's secondary smoke. Whatever reasons they have, we have been sensitized to, we have more cancer now than ever. And, of course, people have to understand. I previously was talking to someone and explaining that although people know that the polio vaccine was contaminated with the SV40 monkey virus that causes cancer, and that this was deliberately administered to everyone anyway because they didn't want to get rid of the materials. What people don't know is that we still had contamination up through the 1990s. Did you know that?
Yeah, I had seen research that showed that they used those vaccines, all the contaminated ones, they were still inoculating people with all the way into the 90s. That's disgusting.
Actually, the vaccines don't last that long. They kept making them, and they still were contaminated.
Oh, that's even
worse. And
worse.
so they deliberately kept making them. They kept making them. millions of doses. And now this sits in your system, and as I've explained elsewhere, these are latent viruses. They need a trigger. When we had these little mice, weanling mice, that we wanted to produce cancer in, we took weanling mice. They had been nursing their mothers for a few days, and they could live without the mother, and injected them with cancer after they had been exposed to radiation. That pulled their immune system down, and what you had then is vulnerable animals because they had no protection, and these mice actually developed cancer in 7 days, in 1 week. And I'm talking about the mouse would be dragging along a lump of cancer, in some cases as big or even bigger than they were, in 1 week. Now that's what happens when your system is down, pulled down by like too much radiation, or you have a lot of stress, you have a lot of carcinogens in your life, or you get exposed to a trigger virus. And trigger a virus that would actually create, it would actually activate the SV40. Or when I say SV40, I'm just being general, because I'm really trying to say is that the SV40 monkey virus is what we started with, but what we ended up with, we do not know, because we were not interested in having controls. We were not interested in what it was, just so it produced the product, and that was what it was about. And so this was just simply creating a bioweapon. To think that nothing has happened in the intervening 48 years, when we have sophisticated information coming out about very advanced techniques used to create, well, for example, as you said before, the various gases. We know that we have bubonic plague that actually they have created, and some of them are. They've even dug up corpses, and pulled out flu viruses that killed people, millions of people back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, they did that up in Alaska or Antarctica, wherever it was. There were bodies buried up there, and they dug them up.
That's right. Now, if they're going to do that, don't you think if they have this cancer virus in their hands, in their clammy little paws, that they're going to just throw it away? When we have Richard Nixon, who knows, he knew about all this. He was friends with Ochsner. Ochsner's wife, his second wife that he married, was good friends with Richard Nixon. When they couldn't get her passport in a hurry, so they could go to Greece when they got married, she called the White House and they got her passport straightened out, just like that. So that's on record in Surgeon of the South, his official biography. So here we go. We've got this cancer virus. We know that if you inject it into someone, the whole idea is that you can't say that it ever happened by any human hand. They just develop cancer just like everybody else can. And then you have very suspicious deaths going on. And look at Mae Brussels. What happened to her? She was a researcher, and all of a sudden she ends up with cancer. And it's amazing how fast it can work. You have some people who suspect it. You have, what's the reggae singer? What's his name?
Bob Marley. They said that the CIA gave him cancer.
Yeah, well, they think that the story I've heard the most often is that he was playing soccer and he damaged his toenail and it got infected. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor supposedly was injecting him with antibiotic. But the way he did it was actually into a vein between the toes. And if you inject between the toes into a vein, okay, that's the same. You have to inject this stuff. At least you did some years ago. You had to inject it into a vein. You couldn't inject it into a muscle or anything. If you're doing an antibiotic, you're not going to inject. You're going to inject into the tissue of the toe itself to cure, some kind of inflammation or something. You're not going to go and put a needle in between the toes. And this is what I heard. Now, I have no way to prove that, but this is what I've heard. And it would be the way to do it. And, of course, he gets melanoma. Now, what's interesting about this is that I worked with melanoma, and at the same time that Al Ochsner did, you'll see that he's presenting a couple of papers on melanoma. At the same time, he asked me to work on melanoma. Right after that, he's publishing papers about it. It's very interesting that he was published papers on many, many subjects, okay? But he's best known as a cancer specialist, despite all the other things that he did, especially heart surgery. Of course, he's the one that trained DeBakey. and his own son is also was still alive and only recently, I think, retired. So they had the facilities, they had the ability, and above all, they had the trust. So this stuff that can stay in your system for years, just like the herpes virus, which is what I'd like to talk about. Herpes virus. Have you ever had a cold sore?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you know that means you have herpes in your body, right?
Yeah, like
it lives there.
I forget. Well, I don't know if it was a cold sore. Is a canker sore a cold sore, or is that different?
Yeah, that's right. That's
okay.
right. Canker sore.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It's very common. Most of the population, the majority of the population, has the herpes virus. They got it from chicken pox. Chicken pox is one of the forms of it. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I had chicken pox when I was 18 months old.
Oh, okay. Well, then that means you still got the virus in your body. Did you know that?
Yeah, I know that you form immunity to it, right? Or some
no,
sort of...
not actually. What happens? It goes to sleep. It stays latent in your system, and only if you get really stressed or your immune system goes way down, so you get a lot of X-rays, then you get an outbreak of it. Older people whose immune systems go down often get shingles, and that's another form of herpes. So this is a virus that can stay in your system for years without showing any symptom, and then at the right time, if it's triggered, you'll get it. So this is why you can't trace these cancers and say, you can get an injection of this material, and only when your immune system goes down would the virus actually be activated. So it's quite difficult to know who might get it. But what we do know is that we have way too many bone cancers, pancreatic cancers, brain cancers, and lots and lots of prostate cancers, which did not exist before. Go try to find the statistics. You'll not find so much of this before. By the way, prostate cancer metastasizes into the bones and causes bone cancer. Mary Sherman worked with that. That was her specialty, was bone cancer. So we worked with bone cancer, various types. When we're talking about the various viruses that we used, mixing them all together, we don't know what we had in the end. It didn't matter. What mattered was the product. So is this in the hands of the wrong people? Well, we think when the handoff happened there and that they obtained or supposedly gave.
It's at this point in the interview that we were cut off for the second time, and I was unable to reestablish the connection to Judyth. Fortunately, 2 days later, on Thanksgiving, we were able to continue the interview. So here's the rest of the interview from Thanksgiving Day.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, thank God. I have been through hell and back to get this phone connection with you.
I appreciate you being willing to, try again one more time.
This is the first time I've had a problem with a cell phone, because I always change the SIMS cards out. How in the world do they know who you are? So they must be hitting at your end, And look what you're doing. I mean, Popeye. I mean, this is Thanksgiving, and you're doing this. I mean, I am so grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you doing it on Thanksgiving. I'm thankful that I'm able. That's what I'm thankful for this year on Thanksgiving, that I'm able to get a second interview with you, and we were able to actually get connected this time.
Okay, well, I don't know how long it'll last, so let's get in with it. And I have some. There's so much. Of course, you've heard the other about cancer, and a lot of people don't really understand that probably most of our cancer problems we're having are exacerbated by man-made cancers on top of our ordinary, naturally occurring ones. And there's no way to discern between them, except there's one little clue, and that is Mary Sherman was working in a bone lab. And her specialty was bone cancer, and the derivatives of the material we were using originally, we know that some of them had to be bone cancer. What we find interesting is that we have very aggressive prostate cancers and lung cancers and so on. and some of them are transferring to bone cancer. And in the past, I'm not sure, I'd like more information, but in the past, we didn't have as many reports. Now, they may argue, the experts may argue with this, but one thing they can't argue with, Popeye, is that heart disease is no longer the number one killer of Americans under 85. And in October 13th, 2011, this year in the New York Times, they said that the American Cancer Society, all these years when they've given us the annual statistics for cancer, they didn't remove the people over 85 who are dying of heart disease, because your heart gives out, you may never have cancer, but your heart is going to give out. When you take out the people over 85, you find out that cancer is the number one killer now. For 98.4% of the population wasn't even being checked for that figure, you see. So when we're talking about, they said they only had the figures for 2002, and yet WHO, the World Health Organization, says that last year, well, in 2007, which is 5 years further along here, they said we had 1,334,100 new cancers, and at least half of those are deaths also that same year. So this is a tremendous number of people who are suffering from cancer, and it behooves us to figure out what we can do, because we're not learning how to prevent cancer. All we're learning how to do is how to treat it, and they don't do a very good job of that either, because why are you having half of them die? Cancer is not, of course there are many different kinds of cancer, but basically if you're not smoking and you're not drinking and you're taking good care of yourself, then you're looking at a few environmental problems. But what's going on here? Why do we have so much? We're susceptible, or we're carrying latent cancer viruses in our bodies. And frankly, when you look at the statistics, that's what's going on. I pulled some statistics off the internet because it's quite interesting to see that if ages below 35, you don't see very much cancer. And yet, and you'd think, oh my gosh, we have less cancer now than ever before. And that's what they keep telling everybody, because they're going on pure statistics of actually, of course, most of our population is basically going to be 35 or under. And they're reporting fewer cancers by a very small amount, I might add. But that doesn't mean an awful lot when you realize that if their age is 35 and above, for 35 to 44, they're getting 34.4% more cancer than before, than in 1950, okay, for that same population. If you're 45 to 54, you're getting 56.2% more cancers than you got in 1950. If you're 55 to 64, you have 150.9% more cancers than you did in 1950. And if you're 65 to 74, you have a whopping 378.8% more cancers than in 1950 for the same number of people. This is adjusted for population. Now, when we're talking about somebody who is 65 years old and they have a 378% greater chance of getting cancer than somebody in 1950 in this country, what happened? And of course, Edward Haslam talks about this. And you can hide the figures all you want, but the fact is that cancer can stay in your body for years, latent, and then erupt, after 20, 30, 40 years. And they can blame it on the environment. But as a matter of fact, we can usually trace this from one individual to the next. We don't want to say things like cancer is contagious. But as a matter of fact, most of us carry the viruses, a number of different viruses, and some of those will cause cancer, and there's not very much we can do about it except to warn people how to handle cancer and how to deal with it, especially so that they won't get it. And Popeye, for example, do you have anybody in your family with cancer?
Actually, yeah, my father had skin cancer, and my mother died of lung cancer. And interesting, I was actually going
Okay.
to bring this up with my last interview when we got cut off a couple of days ago. Um,
Yeah.
the doctor had said to me what kind of led me, and when I got into the cancer end of it, what really pushed me to research it was my mother's doctor had made a comment to me. Um, right before she died. We were talking about her cancer, and he had said to her, well, it was to her, and I overheard it because I was in the room, and he said that her cancer was caused by a rare airborne pathogen, virus type thing that he said, oh, it's 1 in a million chance, but it was, and I was like, you can get cancer from a virus,
A
and
pathogen? Yeah.
yeah, and I thought he was crazy, but when I looked into this research and the stuff that you did, I was like, oh my God, wow, Judith's not kidding.
Yeah.
Look what she's talking about. So wow, yeah, it kind of hits a little personal chord with me. So go on, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I am really sorry. Yeah, I'm really sorry. And let me ask you, what kind of treatment did she get? As if I didn't know already. But anyway,
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
they gave her chemo,
Yeah.
and it didn't help. It made things
They
worse.
burn. Yeah. No, no, it doesn't. There's so much suffering is caused, but I'll tell you something, they make a lot of money off of this. Very few cancers, as a matter of fact, you can have lymphomas and leukemias and so on, are pretty well treated with chemotherapy and with radiation, that's for sure. But generally speaking, this is just not the case. Lung cancer, they're going to burn them. They're finally take out a lung, take out part of a lung. What are you going to do? It doesn't work. And unfortunately, people are, it's like everybody gets the same treatment. It's like, let's put the same shoe. It's a size 5 shoe on, no matter if your foot is a size 10 or 7 or 8, we're going to push this on you and we're going to make it fit. And if it hurts you, that's too bad. It's all we've got. And it's absurd. It's primitive. It's medieval even, because what they say is, well, look, we've got some chemicals here. Now, do you understand, and people need to understand what the principle is behind chemotherapy? And do you know what the principle is, Popeye, or do you think our audience would know?
I guess it's something, well, I've always looked at it as they try to poison the cancer with the chemo, but they end up poisoning your whole body at the same time.
Yeah, here's the thing. It's let's pretend that we're trying to, in a holistic manner, say if you're losing a lot of blood and you infuse the whole body with blood, it's going to help you. Okay, that principle works. But here's what happens with chemo. Chemo isn't something that, of course, helps the whole body, but it unfortunately goes. They actually inject it usually into the body, into the bloodstream, and the principle is this: cancer cells happen to multiply faster than ordinary cells. The other cells that multiply faster, you know what they are? They're your hair cells. That's why your hair falls out, because any cell that's multiplying will be killed by this chemo. So you can't renew your body. Cells that are dividing, they die. You have this poison running around in your system, and the principle is, well, we'll kill as many cancer cells that are dividing as possible. But think about this. Cells that are dividing, they're not all dividing at the same time. In other words, these tumors shrink, but they don't take the tumors out. They never take the tumors out. That is, when I say take them out, I mean they can't KO and they can't knock them out. You always have something left, and then it may sit in regression. Your body may be able to handle it if your system hasn't lost all its capacity to fight the cancer. Basically, the tumors shrink. You're going to gain a few months, but you know something? You feel horrible. Because of the poison in your body that you've had to deal with, your organs are damaged, and you actually don't live any longer. So you have your choice, and I'm generalizing, but basically you don't live any longer. So you have your choice of giving the people an awful lot of money to poison you, and or don't go through it. Don't go get sick to your stomach, and don't have your hair fall out and everything like that. And the cancer progresses, but actually you're going to live just as long as the person who got chemo. Rarely really, these, sometimes it does work. They have treatment for prostate cancer that works. Prostate cancer is a very slow working cancer, so they use radiation on it. And since that's one small organ, it's often very successful. And they'll use hormone therapy and so on. And they watch the levels because these little guys are producing testosterone. They're producing a hormone. And so if the hormone level goes up in your body, they know that these cancer cells are multiplying in your body. And often they will go and migrate. And where do they migrate to? Your bones. Why do we have a prostate cancer that goes and migrates to the bones? Well, I have a theory on this, and the theory is that long ago we were working with bone cancers and made them very virulent. And if you have a cancer that starts in the prostate, it may have had an original origin where it had similar metabolic attributes, the same as bone cancer. They may be related, and it may have come from back in the 60s. It's very possible. Nobody's done any genetic experiments to find out why these so many prostate cancers actually will metastasize and turn into a kind of a bone cancer. But it is a real problem, and that's what usually kills a man. So we have a lot of deaths from that. I'm very concerned because we have millions and millions of dollars are being spent, of course, on chemo and then again on radiation. And they also do surgery to remove intact tumors. But and they say, oh yeah, our death rate from cancer is going down. Well, that's because they're looking at the leukemia and lymphomas and so on. But your cancer of the lung and so on, unless they catch them early enough, that's not the case. And by the way, most of the people who, they talk about mammograms being so great. And oh my, everybody should get one. If you're over 50, you should get them every year. Over 60, get them every year. And the women I talk to who don't have breast cancer being the number one cause of death of women, okay, along with lung cancer. Women who don't get mammograms turn out to have the same survival rate if they detect cancer as those who do. You can argue with some of the statistics, but I'm looking at worldwide statistics. A lot of women in many other places don't have access to mammography, and yet they can feel the cancer. And if they have the access to surgery, they can have that removed, and then their survival rate is similar to anyone who's been getting mammograms every year. And on top of that, you get too many mammograms and you can get cancer. And if anybody want to argue with me, I'll argue with you, because anytime you're exposed to radiation, you're upping the chances that you'll get cancer from the radiation. So if you're between 60 and 80 and you've had 20 mammograms, you've already been exposed to enough radiation to give yourself a good dose of cancer, because you're carrying latent viruses in your system. If your immune system goes down and there's a trigger substance present, you can get it. It can start developing in your body. So how do you avoid that? And I've told people, and people need to really pay attention, stay away from sugar. Cancer cells love sugar, and anything that's sweet, anything that brings your blood sugar up, okay? And that includes potatoes, too much, and think white. If it's white, it's probably going to raise your blood sugar, unless it's a white fat of some kind. So your rices, and especially your potatoes, they turn quickly into sugars that raise your blood sugar when you're eating them. Cancer loves sugar. And so if you can keep those carbs down like that, and the other thing, which I wish they would do, is if someone has cancer, I believe they should be in an oxygen tent. If they get more oxygen, keep the oxygen level above 96%, and with someone who has lung cancer, that's a little hard for them to do that. They'll keep monitoring the oxygen level, and finally they'll put you on oxygen when your lungs are unable to function enough to keep you alive. They'll start adding oxygen. Well, if they start adding the oxygen early, this slows down the rate at which cancer can develop in the lungs, because these cancers anaerobic. That is, they don't like oxygen. It does them no good, but it does gobs and gobs of good for ordinary cells. So you can help yourself by adding oxygen. Well, why aren't they doing this? Well, I don't know why they aren't doing it, all right? There are a lot of things they should be doing. But I do know one thing. It doesn't, there's no big
How would you add oxygen? What way could the listener do it?
They at the very least they should, like they do to anybody who you see elderly people that on oxygen. They have this little tube that goes up in their nose and they're breathing it, and they have a tank. At the very least, people who have cancer should be on something like that, and it will do them a lot of good. It'll help you recover from chemo faster, too, because your normal cells need all the help they can get to recover. They need extra vitamin C, they need extra vitamins, they need proteins. And one of the important things that is not being done, and it's a shame, is people who, before they go into surgery or before they go into chemo, or before they go and get radiation, if their spinal, the condition of their marrow, their bone marrow is sufficient to that they can remove some of it and freeze it. That bone marrow can actually be grown in the laboratory, and you can actually save it. And then after they've had their radiation and all that, you've heard of bone marrow transplants. Use your own bone marrow if it isn't contaminated, you see. And everybody, I would say anybody over 50 should have bone marrow in a bank, frozen, just like you would freeze eggs and sperm. It's cheap. It's there whenever you need it. And then if you get cancer and you go through radiation, you can get your bone marrow back. You can make your own blood supply. You won't be anemic. You have a good chance that you will survive or get better faster. Why don't they do it? It's cheap. I don't know why they don't do it.
How can someone do that, Judyth? Is there you can just go to like a...
Well, it's a little bit painful. That's, you hear about that. Actually, almost every large hospital, MD Anderson, for example, back in 1963, I know that they were saving cells, cancer cells in deep freeze, which we still have with us today. I'm concerned about what kind of cancer cells, because, as you know, Lee Oswald was handed off a fresh batch of material to take to Mexico City, and what he handed them, what did they do with it? All right? And then we noticed that somebody gets sued over there because they said, this guy injected cancer cells into this person. They sued him over at MD Anderson. I think it's appropriate to know that we have a number of hospitals that have deep freeze facilities, liquid nitrogen. When I was working at Peninsular Chem Research in 1963, after leaving New Orleans, and a lot of people don't realize that I did, here I have a so-called a D in chemistry is all that's on my record, and my record's been just ruined, and, my academic record is just completely absurdly inappropriate. I mean, it says I had a D in basic chemistry, and here I am working at Peninsular Chem Research, working with complex hydrofluoric compounds and so on, and polymers of all kinds, and radiation, and
they couldn't erase the history of it, Judyth, because there were actual newspaper
articles.
No,
they couldn't do that because I had I had my check stubs and everything, and my the tax returns. You can see that I was working with that. Well, here's what really got to me. They were asking me to work with to create materials that I knew they needed to have. When you're trying to freeze cells, you have to be, back then and even now, you have to add certain chemicals to them, all right? I'm just being very basic here. So that when they freeze, you don't have ice crystals going and destroying these cancer cells. It'd just be like knives going through them, see? And so the materials that we added to them would stop that from happening. Well, here they're asking me to make them. And we're sending them off to Houston, Texas. So that tells me that there they are. On the same level, though, if we have the ability back in 1960 to protect cells and put them in nitrogen, liquid nitrogen, and deep freeze them, we can do that easily for anybody today. That's just common sense, but they're not doing it, and they should. They should have banks you'd suck a little out, right out of your, it's the marrow. Your marrow is what makes your blood. And that marrow is so precious. And as you get older, by the way, there's less and less of it in your, you make less and less. It's harder and harder for your marrow to recover. Elderly people, if they had bone marrow in a bank, frozen like that, they could actually have it grown. You can grow it in test tubes. We do have the ability to do that. And or even if you just have a little bit, even if you put it back in the body, re-inject it in, it's your own material, it's alive, and typically it will take and it will multiply in your system again. So you can actually keep yourself healthier by adding bone marrow. Well, why aren't they doing it? These are simple expedients that we could use to extend people's lives, and especially if they've been given big doses of radiation. I'm thinking of people like working in over there in Japan, and here they were exposed to enormous amounts of devastating radiation. That's a good example. If they had anybody working in a nuclear plant should have bone marrow, for example, on deep freeze, so that if they get an accident like that, they'd be able to fix them. I'm trying to simplify things and make it easy for people to understand. We could use a lot of technical, and some people may say who are, well suited and they've been trained. Well, I'm oversimplifying things, but we do have the technology to do this and to give every citizen an opportunity to extend their life if they should ever have to be exposed to X-rays or other radiation sources, So these are some concerns I have. And if you want to avoid cancer, avoid X-rays as much as you can. We're way overdoing them in this country. I know one person, she says, well, her doctor has her X-ray her jaw every year. Their dentist does. There's no, he's making money off of that, but that's dangerous. You want to go and give yourself a big dose of bone cancer, that's a good way to do it. Just, this lady, by the way, is in her 70s, and she's had 35 X-rays in her life now of her jaw. You don't need to have that many. And we're often exposed, without knowing it, to other forms of radiation, like radon. Everybody should have their homes checked for radon. If you're on the ground floor, if you're up 10 stories higher or something, that's different. But if you're living on a ground floor level and you're in contact with, and there's no air underneath your house, okay, because it's built right on the rock or it's built right on the solid earth, you should have your home checked for radon. It's another source of radiation that can make you very sick. You have to get that out of your house if you can. You have to air it out. It just floats right in there and you're breathing it in. And, of course, there are things like asbestos in old homes and that people get. But worst of all, of course, is that we, in our daily lives, we're exposed to, for example, gasoline vapors when we're riding in a car. And I've been in cars behind buses, and the driver seems oblivious to the fact that we're being swamped, with all these fumes, and they're carcinogenic. I'm trying to say, look, close your vents, try and get some air in there. That is try and get some cross ventilation if you can, but don't go behind a bus. Don't go behind these trucks, these primitive monsters that are releasing all this stuff into the air. It's so dangerous. Stay away from fats that are overcooked. For example, if you're deep fat frying anything, shame on you. Yes, years and years, think back many centuries, primitive people loved to have their barbecued meat. It's the way that they didn't have any way to preserve it except by smoking it. And hunters and all that. You had to smoke fish and all that. But these, all that tastes so good, all those are carcinogens too. So there you go again. If it's brown on your meat, don't eat it. And and the bacons and the hams and all the processed lunch meats that taste so good and the salamis. If you have salami all over like a pizza or something like that, I don't say never eat them, but I'll tell you this, I always take a big dose of vitamin C. I'll take a chewable vitamin C with me if I go to a pizza parlor. You've got to do something to protect your stomach. That's a slight help. But, of course, avoid it as much as you can. Well, people don't want to do that. They want to enjoy their sugar. They want to enjoy their aspartame, the artificial sugars, and so on. These things are chemicals. Sugar, you pick it up in your hand and you just let it go, and you look, it's all crystals falling in a heap. It could be heroin falling in a heap. I mean, it's just as bad. We get addicted to it, too. And it's in so many products, and cancer loves it. Most of the cancer also that we have that's running around in our bodies, it's latent. It's caused by, a lot of it's caused by viruses. And years ago, when we tried to say, look, cancer, if a woman has breast cancer and then she's nursed her babies, chances are her children, her little girls, are also going to get breast cancer. People don't want to hear those things, but it's true. We see it in mice. We see it in dogs. So many dogs are getting breast cancer because, they were, their mothers had breast cancer, and these puppies nursed, and then they develop it too, when they get older. So what do? You've got it running around in everybody's system. We've got to find different ways to cure cancer, and we're not doing it. It is a crime. We have the technology. We have the understanding. We don't have to go and just slash it out, burn it out, or chemo it out, because even though all these methods make money, they don't get rid of the cancer and they don't prevent the cancer. So I would have done anything to be able to get in the lab and just go down a few of those routes. One of them we talked about with Carolyn was bacteriophage. And I think you know what that is now, don't you, Popeye? Are you still awake?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I know exactly what bacteriophage is. In fact, you talked about it in your book, and we discussed it a little bit the first time. But go ahead and get into it, Judyth, because
bacteriophage is only one of the methods, but it's one of the easiest. And that's bacteriophage. Already, like Soviet Union, they had banks and banks of it. And you were talking about viruses that will go and kill bacteria. Look, tuberculosis, diphtheria, and so on. You have all different kinds of bacteria, like from pneumonia. Right now they're using antibiotics, and antibiotics aren't working very well anymore because, of course, they develop resistance. Well, they also say that, they'll develop resistance to a bacteriophage. Bacteriophage is a virus. It looks like a little miniature mosquito, sort of. It's very, very simple virus, and it has a stinger or sucker. You can think of it like that. It actually pierces into a cell and destroys it, and injects actually multiplies itself in the cell and makes more of its own kind, and it explodes out of the cell and goes and looks for some more. And when all the cells are gone, it goes to sleep and just sits in your body, wafting around there until it brushes up against something that can, you might say, awaken it. It's semi-alive. When it touches the right kind of cell, it'll wake up and get active. This is a remarkable thing because you can actually genetically modify it so it will react only to certain kinds of cells. It doesn't have to be a bacteria, or it could be bacteria in your body, But they stopped doing bacteriophage research because they had antibiotics. You just stick them with a needle and push the antibiotic in, and it would handle 5 or 6 different kinds of diseases. Well, it's not happening anymore. If we work with bacteriophage, we'd be able to have a vast array of them that could be used for a number of different kinds of diseases, like, let's say, tuberculosis, for example. And if a resistance would start building up, it's so easy to genetically modify the bacteriophage with the knowledge that we have today that it's I noticed that they are actually using bacteriophage to deliver little packets or nanopackets now of chemotherapy. So they already have bacteriophage that know how to find cancer cells and deliver chemo on the nano level. Why don't we use them to actually deliver the knockout blow with the bacteriophage itself? That's just one. There are other ways to handle cancer too, but this is the one that's I find intriguing because you could, with ongoing research, you could handle many different kinds of cancers, soft tissue cancers in particular, and melanoma and things like that. So I noticed that for 10 or 12 years now, I've been writing different labs and encouraging people. And we do have some labs now that are doing some research in bacteriophage, and this is very encouraging. So I hope that they continue. Hasn't had a lot of success because, hey, if you can cure cancer, where does all the money go then? You've got all those chemotherapy drugs that, it costs them millions and millions and millions to create, and they want to get their money back. You have all these radiation dealing machines. You have all these people trained to handle the radiation. And wait a minute, bacteriophage, you're just going to have somebody come into a clinic and get, they're going to check them out, and they're going to give them a shot, and they say, go home. Well, their hair's not going to fall out. They're not going to get deathly ill. Maybe they'll get a little diarrhea or a sore spot. If they have a big tumor, it'll turn to pus, and they'll have to pull the pus out, or they'll maybe get a temperature from that, but it's not going to be anything like if they catch the cancer in time. Large cancers will always have to be excised if possible. But bacteriophage or something similar would actually track down any loose metastasizing cells. I'm very much simplifying this, Popeye. It's more complicated than this, but I'm saying we easily have the technology to cure cancer half a dozen different ways. Some of the ideas out there are not all that good. They talk about changing the pH of cancer, for example, thinking that this is going to make a difference. Well, if that were true, our pHs in our bodies shift slightly anyway, depending on what we eat. Most of us have way too much acid in our system. If you drink a Coca-Cola and you're not balancing that with calcium, like a calcium carbonate pill, which I would, if I'm going to have a Coca-Cola, I'm going to have myself 2 or 3 tablets of calcium so I don't lose any bone, because that's what happens there. So, but if you don't know these things, just stay away from things that are so acid. We're putting way too much acid in our systems, actually. In nature, you don't find that many sources of acid. For example, how many of us would be eating rotten apples? That would have some vinegar effect. Cider. Think of apple cider vinegar. How many of us actually would drink, say, a pint or 2 pints of vinegar? But but we have phosphoric acid that's in a Coca-Cola, and drink that down, and then you think that doesn't have an effect on your body. Your body has to deal with that pH difference. Well, pH is one of the things you have to worry about when you're treating cancer too, but they really go to extremes. Actually, you can hurt yourself by following some of these ideas that they have out there. Just be careful. Take your vitamins, do a lot of vitamin C, use a lot of vitamin D3, stay away from, direct sunlight to the point where it might sunburn you. We have a lot of ozone that's depleted now in the atmosphere, and we can get cancer, skin cancer, a lot more easily, just like your father got it, you said?
Yeah. That's exactly what he got it from the sun. He has to be careful. Sure. He can't go out in direct sunlight, and we live in South Florida. So down here, it's even worse because we're closer to the equator. So the sun's more intense down here than it is in other parts of the country. So you can't go out in the sun down here. You get more sunlight, but actually it's more dangerous very far north where
the ozone layer actually has holes in it. And if people in Scandinavia and so on, if it weren't so cloudy and dark so often a period of time, they would have more skin cancer than they do. The other thing is that a lot of people are subjecting themselves, again, to all kinds of, almost everybody's using sodium lauryl sulfate. That's the number one cheapest flocculant. Look, I'll put it this way. It foams, and so it's in all your shampoos and soaps and everything. It is almost impossible to find a good soap that is safe for your baby or safe for you that doesn't have, unfortunately, has this sodium lauryl sulfate in it, or sulfide. This chemical is poisonous, and it's we don't even know if it's carcinogenic, but we know one thing: it's not good for your skin, and it's not good for you, and yet we have almost no choice because there's nothing else that we have out there anymore to wash with. You're going to have to go to glycerin soap or something if you want to really protect your skin. And then what about your hair? So you wash your hair as fast as you can with the stuff, rinse it off as fast as you can. It's we're exposing ourselves all the time to the most deadly things. Another one is creams. If that cream has a petroleum base, it has like mineral oil, and your cheaper hand creams and face creams, when you're rubbing mineral oil all over your body, this is a petroleum product, and it's carcinogenic. It can cause cancer. You want to go and give mice cancer, just soak them in petroleum jelly, and do things like that to them and watch what happens to them, because their metabolisms are faster than ours. I'm not saying you can give cancer to a mouse by rubbing it with jelly. I'm just saying if they have a cancer and you put that petroleum jelly on it, it's going to make it worse, okay? And in a lifetime, if you're using these oils and things like that, you're doing harm to your body. And you're going to have precancerous lesions and things. You're going to have these spots on you and so on. And a lot of that isn't due to the sun. It's due to the chemicals you're putting on your body. So, use olive oil and things. That's what the Romans did way back when. They rubbed their bodies down with olive oil and scraped them clean and all that. They soaked in nice warm baths, and they used soaps that were, if you use a glycerin soap, again, that's not going to hurt you. But so we're just surrounded in chemical soups that are not good for us, and it's amazing that we don't have more cancers than we do. Our bodies are extremely good at trying to fight this stuff off. But again, some of this cancer, we believe, is actually man-made and has been developed for various purposes. Maybe it was used originally to try and terminate someone's life a little faster than otherwise it would have occurred. On the other hand, maybe it just got out of control. But we know that President Nixon, such a nice, ethical man as he was, and he was not a crook. And as he told us, that he certainly knew how to control certain things. He knew about the ability of cancer to kill, and it could get in the wrong hands. He made sure he declared a war on cancer and pulled it all together, had everybody send in all their materials to Fort Detrick, and we don't know what happened to him from there. Do we have a weaponized cancer in the world today? I'll just put it this way. We can't prove that we don't. We can't. And when the fact is that in the 1960s we were working on weaponized cancer, and there's no reason for me to doubt that MD Anderson, for example, obtained some of it, and where it went from there. 48 years later, I do believe that they didn't just throw this away. And unfortunately for us, if we have eugenics going on. Hitler talked about trying to get the population under control and get rid of certain kinds of people. And Dr. Ochsner and others, they had friends or themselves belonged to eugenics societies. That is, they were interested in purifying races, getting rid of certain genes that were in the population that they didn't like. We know there were racism elements among these people also. They were racist. Anybody want to hear what Guy Bannister thought about blacks or about Catholics? Well, whatever. We have, for sure, we have people who are interested in getting rid of certain elements of the population. We can't prove anything like that now. All that is hidden. It's taboo. You never hear anybody. If anybody even makes a racial slur right now, they're called on the carpet. But behind the scenes, we don't know what's going on. We don't, when scientists are going to go and declare that they've made this or that advance, notice there are always teams of scientists working. The reason we were able to develop a weaponized cancer material back in the 60s is we were all compartmentalized. Understand that once we couldn't have anybody knowing about these mice and then the monkeys. You imagine you have a mouse and in 7 days it's got a tumor as big as itself. Nobody needs to see that, and that's why we had this very odd project going on where nobody saw these mice. We were eviscerating them. We were taking the cancers, macerating them, getting the virus out of it, getting the live tissue cultures, and then legitimate labs were getting these batches of test tubes. And they said, okay, here's something that Mary Sherman wants us to work with, and so on. And they want to radiate this. They're going to go put this in with radiation. They've got some mice. They're going to go and give these mice or monkeys radiation, but they don't see what it's about. So we don't know what nations or what elements or what some sick mind might be behind some of the projects. We have these big pharmaceutical companies. We have these batches of scientists working. Several of them maybe are working together from different universities. And it may look like, they're on this project or that. But if they're working with a ring and they don't know about what other people are doing with their product, this is when you're talking about biowarfare, and we know this is going on. When we had this anthrax scare, for the first time, Americans learned that we were actually making anthrax in labs. Why would we do that? I can understand us having anthrax, small amounts of anthrax, and testing to try and find a way to handle it, to cure it, to deal with it. But no, we're producing a lot of it. So we're using it as, of course, this is a bioweapon. If we're doing that and it finally gets out to the public, same old thing. They blame one man for what was probably a false flag thing going on there where, you had an envelope full of anthrax spores was sent out there, and this one person got blamed for it, and that's the chances that one individual is able to actually filter out that size and work with that size of the bacillus. I mean, just ridiculous. Anthrax is the kind of anthrax that they were dealing with. It's very complex, and there's no way that this one person, he killed himself, They bugged him and blamed him, and finally he killed himself. But chances are we had a ring of labs working on that. Certainly one person doesn't know what the other's doing, and that's how they can make sure that you can develop all sorts of things. Only a few people know what's really going on. I don't even know who the other people were in our project. I do know that we had papers to sign off, so I saw initials, and you could guess who they were, that kind of thing. But heaven knows what they do now, because probably now it's on computers and it's all, coded, and somebody gets a batch of test tubes and they're in a lab and it's full of some kind of bacteria or it's full of some kind of special cancer, and they're told what to do. We want you to do a bioassay on this. We want you to go ahead and do some gas chromatography on this, see what's in it, see what trace. They just do what they're told, and they don't know what's going to happen with it. So nobody has a responsibility, and we don't even know what we're developing. But one thing I do know, we're not curing cancer, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
so
all the
this
money
is something
that
I did want to talk about.
All the money that we're wasting, and on crap.
Well, now wait a minute. We're not wasting. Popeye. We're not wasting that money. People are getting rich on that. I can't think of all the specialists, the people running the X-ray machines, the oncologists. These people would be out of a job. I mean, we're talking about thousands of people who would suddenly become obsolete. All their machines would be obsolete, all those chemicals, and all those companies making all those billions of dollars. Do you think they really, really, really want to cure cancer when this is a great population control device? We're talking about 1.5 million people every year. 1.5 million people get it, and half of them are going to die just in the United States.
And that's what I was thinking, because we know there is even from their own writings, they talk about the culling and the great culling of, the masses, the cattle.
Yeah, there's no incentive. If we really cared, I see all these ads where they show these poor, starving, usually poor little black kid, all head and bones, and big distended belly because there's no protein in that child's system, and their hair is fallen out or it's turned white because they have insufficient protein and insufficient calories and everything. And they say, feed the children. You know what they should be doing? They should be handing out birth control pills like candy so that women have a choice. That's the easiest way to handle all this terrible suffering that's going on. Give these women a choice like we have in advanced countries. When you have an advanced country where you have choice, you know what happens? The population stabilizes, and actually, like in Sweden and places like that, they actually have to pay them to have children. Look, the government says we have to have more children. Because people will have just 1 or 2 children, maybe 3 at the most, depending on who they are and what their resources are. But women would have a choice instead of just becoming baby manufacturers. And I have a little anger at certain religions that say, well, you should have as many children as you possibly can, and you should have maybe multiple wives and so on, because we're no longer in the condition where we're aboriginal and we're going to lose a lot of kids, or parents need children in order to survive when they're in their old age. They have to have children to take care of them. We're supposed to have governments doing that. Governments are supposed to not just protect us or do war, and that seems that's all our government knows how to do. The government should be put together to protect us from the things that otherwise would harm us, and it has everything to do from taking care of us when we're ill to making sure that we have enough to eat and so on. And that another thing too, the most disgusting part, I suppose, of cancer treatment these days is when I was quite young, I noticed that if a child had cancer, they went to a hospital and everybody, they paid some money, but then before everybody went broke, everybody chipped in, and basically it was free. And we do have some free hospitals where that goes on. But we have proprietary hospitals now. It should be against the law to have a hospital or a nursing home that exists in order to make money. Because what we're talking about, the principle there is how can we treat them as cheap as possible to make as much money as possible. That is unethical. It doesn't belong in medicine at all. Not at all. A friend of mine, his name is George, lives in Sweden. He's paid his taxes. By the way, those taxes altogether, they don't come to any more than what our health insurance payments would come to us. It's about the same percentage. When you put, we have to pay for health insurance, on top of our taxes and all that, it comes out to about the same for the Swedes. It costs him, he said, 85 cents a day in the hospital. That's what it cost him. And they gave him his 2 operations, and, you know, his chemotherapy he did get and all that. He's cured of cancer, and you know what? He didn't lose his house. He didn't lose his bank account. And most important of all, I think, is that he has a future. When we, in the United States, when I see all of us eventually are going to meet a final date with a doctor and a hospital somewhere, and to think that that is probably going to wipe out anything you could have given your kids. They're going to take all the money. If you remove the amount of money that insurance companies take from the American people, okay, if you take that whole bunch out, say they're getting $500 or $1,000 a month, depending on how old you are or whatever, take that out of the equation, and you know what? The price on the other end is still about twice what it is anywhere else. Anywhere else. And they can talk about the quality, you know, that's just the way it is. You know, we have the best treatment, have the best hospitals. It's not true. Absolutely not the case. We don't have the best anymore unless you've got enough money for it. And to think that we have hospitals that make money off of our ill and our sick and our helpless, to me, this is one of the most unconscionable symptoms of the illness in our society. We can gripe about this, but if we don't solve the problem, it's going to stay with us. If the people keep making talk about banks making their billions, these pharmaceutical companies are making their billions. They're so powerful, as a matter of fact, that we don't even know what they're developing or what goes into vaccines. We don't know what we're getting, and we don't know what's going into our water. We have so little control. It's time we took control. You talk about Occupy. One of the things we should occupy right now, people should get together in their towns, in their villages, in their churches, and they should form their own insurance companies. And, for example, if churches, say 5 or 6 churches in an area, form their own insurance company and set it up with accountants and all that and try to keep it honest, that's not easy in our society today, but it can be done. There would be, if we could set up some templates, we would have an opportunity to do what insurance companies used to do. Insurance companies should not say, well, we're not going to let you have this and we're not going to let you have that because we won't make enough money, you know. Anything that is necessary should, but on the other hand, you've got to stop people from suing, you know, lawsuits that make it impossible for a kid that just gets out of medical school and he's afraid to do a thing without being on a team. You can't be a doctor going from house to house. You know, you can't be a general practitioner with his own business. He's got to have 5 or 6 or 10 people with him in a big clinic to protect himself. Make sure he's got enough specialists, make sure he's got enough insurance, and they pool it together. Well, we need to pool together. We need to get reform in our the way we handle things. When I see that Sweden has only 9 million people and they have free, hear me, free medical care, okay, and they live longer than Americans, okay, and their kids go to college for free. They're not strapped down. The people of my country, the United States of America, have been sucked dry. They've been raped. They've been despoiled. They've been destroyed by greed, poor ethics, immorality, and I hope everybody occupies. They need to go and occupy the hospitals. They need to occupy everywhere where, and insurance companies, everywhere where we're being abused. There was a couple that sat on the stairs. I'll never forget it. I had moved into an apartment, and I had just been hurt. Someone had hurt me, and I had just gotten out of a wheelchair. And it's because when you speak out, bad things happen to you. And this couple, they were in their 40s. They were sitting there and looked very sad. And I said, "What's the matter?" And they both said the same, had the same sad story. They both were working 60 to 70 hours a week. They'd had this dream that if you work hard enough, you'll have your own home. But no, they're sitting in front of an apartment. You know what? They had had one illness in their life, and it completely wiped them out. One broken leg wiped them out. Just one broken leg. That did it. But worse than that, they realized, even though they're now working 60, 70 hours a week, they would never be able to afford a child. Because, you see, they had consciences and they wanted to do right. And they were sitting there looking sadly and realizing they would never have a home and they'd never have a child because another medical emergency would certainly come up. You know, maybe one of them get cancer, maybe one of them had a bad heart, have to have an operation. They would never, ever be able to have a baby. And I thought, and that this was 10 years ago. And more people are realizing that they're only one hospital visit away from disaster, from complete destruction of their entire lives. I just grieve. My heart breaks. I wanted to cure cancer. I wanted to help people. And they also make it so difficult and so expensive. If I could have gone back to school all by myself after my enemies died, I would have done it. But I want so much to help people, and I can do nothing. All I can do is gripe a little like now and ask people, please take care of yourselves. Don't, you instead of these proprietary nursing homes, community get together and make your own nursing home where everybody takes turns, maybe taking care of people. Find yourself a couple of good doctors, that will want to get free from this big clinic system they're in, and but then you have to worry about very expensive chemicals, very expensive medicines. The whole thing is so rigged. It's just, that's why I believe that socialized medicine works. I've seen it in Sweden. And if the people, and if nothing's perfect, but if 9 million people can do it, this means on a state level, every state could actually form their own organization. And if the board that is running things doesn't do it right, they can get rid of them because they can sue them. I say sue them. We don't want to do that, do we? So instead of that, we elect them. If they're elected and they don't do their job, you kick them out of office and you put somebody in there who does, who will do what the people need. So, there are ways to reform our system. It has to be from the ground level up. I'm simplifying things, and I know I sound naive, and it sounds even absurd. You may say, well, Sweden's socialistic. Don't give it a name. How about taking care of the people? What is the government supposed to do? They're saying, well, we can take care of ourselves. No, we're hostages. We are hostages to this system. This system has decided what we will pay. This system has decided what they will cure us of and what they won't. We could have cured cancer 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's something that's
carrying on. I'm sorry.
No, that's something that really should be talked about and needs to be touched on. The fact that you guys you've said multiple times, not just on interviews with me, but with on other radio shows and other interviews you've done, that you by now, if you had been left up to your research and they had kept funding you the way they were to make this bioweapon, you would have been able to cure cancer years and years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I myself, I knew how to make cancer. Once you know how to make it, you know how to break it. It's just like cake. I'm just saying that, there are ways, if I'd had an opportunity, they didn't want that. They never wanted it. Things changed right in about 1958, 1959, right in there. That's when things started to change. Doctors stopped going out from house to house. They started making a business out of this instead of a service. And we lost our ethics. And we've lost so much more than that now. We're losing our humanity. One of the things I do is I write, I have a question I would tell my students, and that is, what is human? If we lose track of who we are and what we are, we're very close to becoming something quite different. And the governments actually play upon this a lot. They will give you your radio programs, your TV programs, your sports, anything that will keep you from thinking. I can't tell you how many hours people waste by watching television and certain sports and all that. And don't get me wrong, a lot of that is fun. It's nice to have recreation. But we we come home exhausted because we're overworked. How can it be that in our country we have people working 60 hours a week, and we talk about that we have an unemployment problem? We wouldn't have an unemployment problem if, like in some other countries I know, where people can make a decent living working 40 hours a week and they have their medical care and everything. If a person's working 40 hours a week instead of 60, you know what? You've got 20 hours there that somebody else can work. And if you're not trying to just make as much money as you can and exploit the person, okay, everybody will have a job. Remember back when they had those white picket fences and, you had the dad go out and work and
the American
mom
dream,
was, cleaning house. Yeah, the American dream. What happened to it? Everybody works, and by the way, if they don't both work, they're not going to be able to pay their bills. They just can't. So we're losing the middle class, and we're becoming a class of worker ants. I don't have much time left here, okay. And I've griped an awful lot. And I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity. The first time in my life, actually, I've been able to really complain, and I don't know whether negatives do any good. I'm just telling you, other systems on this planet have solved this problem. They're happier. They're working. Over in Sweden and in Scandinavia in general, we're talking about people who, if they get a major illness, they go into the hospital. They're taken care of, and it doesn't cost them anything. Their kids go to college for free. If they can't pay, they have very small taxes on their houses, but if they can't pay it, they don't lose their house. It's just that if they try to sell their house, that has to be paid, that kind of thing. What's interesting also is that the quality of life. Sweden is the greenest country on the planet's surface. Kids, before they can walk, they're recycling things. I'm just saying there are ways, and it's because in Sweden they have many different political parties, and if people don't do what they're supposed to, they're voted out. I see that as a democracy, so I don't understand what's the matter with it. Why people say, oh, we can't have that, Well, do you like what you've got? So, but beside all this is the anniversary of when Lee died. It is a day of sorrow for me. Lee Harvey Oswald, I don't think that a lot of people realize that so much time has passed, that he was only in custody for 47 hours, and then he was shot dead by Jack Ruby so that he wouldn't talk. One of the reasons he had to die is it wasn't simply because he knew, and you can read it in the book, Me and Lee, we knew who wanted Kennedy to die. Lee did his best to try to save Kennedy, and as you know, Abraham Bolden says a person named Lee saved Kennedy's life in Chicago, and Lee was never one to brag. He simply told me, when he was in the Soviet Union, I said, did you save anybody's life there? And he said, I believe so. I believe I did, he said. He always, he understated things. And so when he told me that he saved Kennedy's life, he didn't brag and he didn't explain. But it meant a lot to me when I found out years later, because when I first spoke out and said Lee tried to save Kennedy's life, it was really hard for some people to swallow that. They'd been taught so much that he had done evil. He was a bad person, or at the very least, he was a loser and easy to make a scapegoat out of. Well, they had to kill him because he wasn't that easy to make a scapegoat out of. Okay, so they had to terminate his life. He gave his life for his country, and more and more people are learning this about him. You see all those photographs of Lee, and he's smiling. He's got his arms around women. They have their arms around him. And even though he and Marina did not get along, that doesn't mean that he didn't get along with other people. But no, that's not what you read in the Warren Commission. You read time and again where they say he was sullen and didn't talk to anybody. Well, these were people like at Riley's. When we were working a cover job there at Riley's, we didn't talk to hardly anybody. So then they use those as witnesses against him, showing that he has a bad character. Well, there are a lot of things he couldn't talk about, but among his friends, that was completely different. He was a talented and amazing man, and I stand as a witness to that. And I encourage everybody to rethink what your government tells you and what your government is doing to you. Consider people don't have to die of cancer. We can fix it. People don't have to lose everything they have in a hospital. Don't have a hospital that exists to make money. It's unethical. Help doctors, young men to go through college. Try and set up funds for them so that they don't have to be deep in debt for the rest of their lives trying to pay it off. And sign pledges that you're not going to sue a doctor if something goes wrong, so that they don't have to charge an arm and a leg. So we have to be nice to them. They have to be nice to us. Let's go back to being human, going back to those final things that made us a great country and made us people say, I am an American, I'm proud to be an American, and I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to do what's right for my fellow man. Okay? If you're a good American, you know what you should do. Well, right now, we're just taught to think of ourselves. So, it's time to think of your neighbor. It's time to think, what can I do? Lee Oswald wanted to serve his country. He was only 17 when he joined the Marines. And he even tried the year before to join and tried to use a faked birth certificate so he could get in a year early, but he was not big enough and strong enough, and they didn't believe how old he was, and of course he wasn't. He was only 16. At age 17, somehow he made it through boot camp, and he wasn't built like a gorilla. He had sheer guts, and I admire him so much. He said to me, I love you, and I'm yours as long as my heart is beating. When he was shot, they took him into a room for 5 minutes before the ambulance came, and we don't know what they did. We have only what the police say, but we know one thing. They tried to get him to confess that he did it, and he shook his head. He wouldn't confess that he killed Kennedy because he didn't do it. He's in agony, and they're questioning him, and he's got a bullet in him. And then they put him in the ambulance, and God knows what they did in there, but we know one thing, what they didn't do. The ambulance receipt shows that he received no oxygen. How can you do that to a man who's hemorrhaging? And they said they gave him chest massage, which is the last thing you do to somebody who has a wound in their abdomen, all right, because it causes hemorrhage. And of course, he was filled with blood, and he died from loss of blood. That's how he died. When I see how he was neglected, how he was mistreated, and I don't see any record that he was given anesthesia when he was cut wide open to operate on him. These are unconscionable things. They didn't want him to live. So it's a heartbreaking thing, and I think about it once a year. And I wanted to remember. I didn't want to forget. And Popeye, I made a poem, a really long mnemonic poem with all the people's names in it and everything like that, so I wouldn't forget. And at Thanksgiving, it was easy because as a mother, I would have to make these big meals. And I said, I'm tired now, and I would rest for a day. And during that day of rest, I would think on Lee and his words. I never want to forget them, because I was afraid if I forgot him, nobody would ever remember. They'd believe the lies about him. And I just pray someday that we'll all meet in heaven. You'll see what a great man he was. And Kennedy, too.
I have a feeling he's looking down on you, Judyth, and I know he's proud of you. So, I mean, I myself am proud of you. I know everybody that's ever heard your story is very amazed with the courage and the fortitude that you have, because, you've faced many obstacles, many threats, and yet you keep on going. So you've done the right thing. You did very good. And
I won't stop. I won't stop, Popeye. It's too important. People, if there's even one voice, against the wind and all that, it's not going to be in vain. I know some people have heard, and I know it's changed everything for them. They've seen now who he was, and they understand. And besides, they've seen so many lies of the government. They know what Lyndon Johnson was. It's all coming out now. Back in 1999, when I first spoke out, people were saying, "Oh, come on, Lyndon Johnson wouldn't have," Oh my God. Anyway, we know so much more now, and so I don't feel alone, and I feel very proud that the best people I know are on my side. I have good people on my side, and those who do criticize me, who are good researchers, they've never met me. That makes a difference, because anybody I've spent a week with, for example, they're my friends for life, and I'm theirs. I mean, I really love people, and people, it comes across finally. And finally, I'd like to say that Lee Oswald loved children, and I'm not saying he was a good husband to his wife, but if you knew the whole story about that, there are other sides to that, and we don't go there, because what's important is that Lee got Marina Oswald out of the Soviet Union, okay? And she's a free woman, a free society, and she has 2 children, and they grew up free. They can be proud of Lee Harvey Oswald. Thank you for this opportunity.
No problem, Judyth. I want to give you the opportunity before you go, just to give out your websites and your YouTube channel where people can see your
that
videos.
Would be terrific. Yeah. Yeah, and we're making more videos, and when we get donations, it helps us get even more, because it takes time to do that. But I have a little help. This is Lola for JVB for LHO. That's Lola, Lola, and the number 4, and then JVB, and then another number 4, and then LHO. And those YouTube videos are going to show you how Lee was framed. We have one about the magic bullet, and we're going to put more up too, because when people see these, their eyes get open. We have so much evidence now that Lee was railroaded and how he was framed, and it makes those who say that Oswald did it, when they have these specials on TV and everything, they're not flying with the American people. The people know. More and more they know because of the Internet. Now here's the other place where you can find a lot of essays that will help, and that's Judyth Baker, Judyth Baker, at blogspot.com. And then also Judyth Vary Baker at blogspot.com. And finally at Scribd, that's Scribd. At Scribd, you'll find essays. You're going to put my name in, Judyth Vary Baker, and put Oswald and put Scribd, Scribd. You're going to see how, for example, how Lee's, everything about him, they twisted it and they turned it and they made him look like a really bad person. Even what he read, his reading habits in New Orleans. He takes a book out, for example, called What We Must Know About Communism, right? Sounds kind of nasty, right? Turns out that book was recommended by Hoover of the FBI, right on the front page. So, you've got to know what these things are about and not just take the word of the government, because, boy, did they do a railroading job on Lee. It's terrible. Anybody who would like to buy a book from my website, that does help me, because I don't get anything from, like, Amazon. They discount it deeply, and that's fine with me. If you can't afford to get the book at my website and help me get it from Amazon at under $15 plus then shipping, there is a difference. The paperback has more information about my witnesses. We have living, and they were alive at least. We have them on tape and film. And for some reason, one of my witnesses, Mac McCullough, didn't even get in the hard copy. And we also had some problems with, there were just some errors, and we don't know how it happened. But at any rate, the paperback is in great shape, except, well, some of the photographs are a little dark, but I can't complain, because you get a heck of a lot of book for not very much money. And Chris Milligan is a tremendous guy. I never put the book anywhere else. It never went to any publisher but him. once the book was stolen and was published by Mr. Livingston, I had no control over that. And this book is accurate, and it's been authorized. Me and Lee, How I Came to Know, Love, and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald. With a foreword by Jim Mars, God bless him, and by Edward Haslam. It's like the hand of God, because how Ed found the information, I don't know. We thought we had hidden everything so well, and yet he found out about the project. So thank you for this opportunity, and I won't be speaking again to anybody, Popeye, but I will be there at Dealey Plaza in 2013, God willing that I'm alive. I'll be there, and I hope everyone will stand with me. Don't let the Sixth Floor Museum in the city of Dallas take Dealey Plaza away from the people. That's what they intend to do. They want to stop us from having our demonstrations. We need to occupy Dealey Plaza in 2013 and not let the city take it over and say that Lee Oswald killed Kennedy on the 50th anniversary. That's what they want to do. And so I'm going to risk everything. I don't care what it takes or what happens to me. I will gladly go to jail if that's what it takes to make sure that they don't take over Dealey Plaza. And I've had so many fine researchers write to me and say, I'm going to be there with you, Judyth. So that's what's going to happen.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Be in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 2013, and give Judyth some backup for the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Judyth, thank you so much.
Let's give Kennedy some praise and some. Can you believe that this man has no monument, no great monument for him? What do they have? They have the Sixth Floor Museum where they say he was shot from. That's their monument. It's so evil. Okay, I've said my piece. Thank you. God bless you, and take care. I'll be going back to a safe country now. I'm overseas in a different country. I wish I could come back to my country, but in 2013 I'm going to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Judyth, so much, and stay safe.